Okay, good morning, good evening, good night, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be coming in from. It's very early in the morning here at New York City, and I know it's rather late at night in Korea, and someplace in between for other folks out there. Thank you for joining us today. We're super excited to welcome you and welcome our august panelists to the 2021 OGP Academy session on digital governance and public communication. My name is Professor Stephen Duncombe. I'm from New York University, and I'll be the moderator of this session. We have four wonderful panelists with us today. Taejun Lee, professor from KDI School. Alex McFarland, the chair of LG Comms. Carlotta Alfonso, a policy analyst at OECD. And joining us by video, Professor Taejun Lee from Korea University. And our time is short today, so I want to just kick this straight off by handing this over to Professor Taejun Lee. Taejun.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Could you help us and share my screen? Excellent. How can I share my screen? Okay. Just a moment, please. I'm sorry. What happened to my Zoom? Yes, I know, but I'm not allowed to share my screen technically. Okay, excellent. Okay.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the KDI and Korean local authorities and the central ministry the co-experiment to ensure that young population, the young people, to be more technologically savvy and even have a greater levels of the social media literacy in responding to carbon neutrality policy issues and the circular economy agendas. Basically, we are experimenting with local communities, youth leaders interested in carbon neutrality. This is a national level experimentation of helping the young people to use wisely and effectively use the social media and have a greater understanding and knowledge about the carbon neutrality future agendas they are facing. Research background, and indeed, and COVID-19 pandemic has increased the need to rethink our society and provide us with an opportunity to build back better, to inspire the circular community and to support the scaling of the circular solutions at a grassroots level. And we need inspiring experiment, citizen engagement, and public communication, and even relationship building between the state and the citizens from different areas. Primary causes of climate inaction are no longer lack of knowledge or technology, but rather the challenges related to the politics and the governance. So in the transition to a circular economy, all solutions by government have a role to play in enabling and implementing the transition, and especially behavior changes of the citizens. So the nationally in South Korea, the conducting public communication campaign to enable the young citizens to rethink their economy, and the setting up the national agendas and the future plans about the future by making systemic changes of awareness and cognition and attitude and even behaviors, and for the better the society in response to climate and the changes. In this project, we widen our scope and challenge ourselves to identify and assess inspiring circular economy solutions of engaging young people with open government partnership. OECD Open Government and Open Government Partnership, have been very viable and even meaningful to Korean society to make a necessary governance reforms and innovation, and also reduce the distance between the state and the citizens in terms of a policy cycle and the public service co-creation and co-delivery. During this project, we aim to identify what viable public communication strategies and practices tell us about transition to citizens' behavior that support the development of social well-being and employment, community resilience, and tackle major and environmental challenges. This study is to apply a data-driven public communication campaign for carbon neutrality into youth-led organization activities in public schools, high schools in South Korea, objectively analyze what impacts it has and how it supports the creation and change of a systemic behavior, the changes of young people for a circular economy. We refer to the OECD, the trust in government among young people. The engaging young people, the public communication campaigns for climate action has been very important to Korean society. So one of the signals we need to see, the young people, the place, the lower levels of the trust in government in recent days, and especially after COVID-19, the youth organizations are contributing to social and economic resilience in various ways, targeting the young people. But young people would like to be more engaged with the policy process and the governance culture, and even the nationally and the government in South Korea try to run information campaigns to keep young people informed on measures and services and innovations to protect the Korean citizens and to prepare a better future and a stronger society. Research questions put forth. Does participating in a carbon neutral challenging public communication campaigns in a social media platform that we used in the TikTok platform. So we made a strategic partnership with the TikTok for this campaign. These campaigns raise awareness of climate change and interest in policies and concerning carbon neutrality. The second question is how our attitude towards and climate change are different between those who participate in TikTok and challenging public communication campaigns and those who did not. Last question, how does the participating in a TikTok challenge campaigns affect attitude towards the climate change dependent upon the factors of individual characteristics. So we made a data-driven platform and data-driven systems to enable this experiment to serve better the youth generations, the media usage behaviors, and the media consumption behaviors and the media literacy. So we made one team from multifaceted expert groups, the data scientists and content creation and expert, and a think tank such as KDI, and the central and the local government managers, and policy research and a policy expert in the areas of carbon neutrality with a greater understanding about Korean carbon neutrality transition and a circular economy. So we made a data science system and infrastructure to make a more customized the values and experiment and to serve participants from the local community, high school, the students with MZ in a generation. This is a data-driven public communication lab. Okay, that's kind of a certain kind of a policy lab and designed by data scientists and the think tank and other and a multidisciplinary expert to help the young citizens enjoy more and greater the level of understanding and experience of carbon neutrality issues and topics and future agendas using social media, TikTok. So that's a kind of a national level media literacy campaign. And also this is kind of a civic education tool, and also this is kind of a public communication tool of making understanding government decisions and policies of carbon neutrality, and even helping average citizens understand their future using social media, public policies, and social the contents and the data related to carbon neutrality. This is a data science and a process and a design thinking at a model that designed by multi-disciplinary expert to help the young citizens participating in this at a model. So let me skip and please take a look at some pictures. We ran at a policy education to deliver and share the meanings and information of carbon neutrality with the young citizens. And we made a content and a social media service design and a modeling to commit themselves into the meaning and interaction and even intermingled situations of carbon neutrality in their local communities and context. And then we made a TikTok social media short contents. They can be diffused, they can be disseminated to neighbors, communities, friends, and family, and Korean society to help carbon neutrality and a circular economy get a widespread recognition and attention from the Korean society. So they did a good job, and they made a great and excellent and contents using social media platform and TikTok. We used the key factors and many kinds of components related to behavior change, the communications suggested by the literature and prior studies and international organizations. We pay attention to trust in government, and we use the social media literacy and the dispositions toward and problem solving as a very important mediating factor, moderating factor, and dependent variable is we're going to use for measuring this kind of national campaigns and literacy interventions, the effectiveness. So this 116, the 116, the young generations that participate in the experiment and event. As you can see from this slide, and participants with a high proactive problem solving tendencies and show that higher awareness of environmental issues and through the TikTok for Good and campaigns and public communication, the event. However, this was only the case with the high media literacy. So media literacy is a really important precondition and the boundary condition to help the young people get a better tendencies, greater tendencies of the problem solving related to environmental issues. Groups of were engaged in environmental issues prior to TikTok for Good campaign challenges showed more interest and awareness of reform after this campaign. However, high trust in government, the citizens serve as a precondition to this result. To put it another way, trust in government is really important to the preconditions of making the young people's the more engaged with this kind of intervention and a national level campaign. So national level campaigns must be based on the social capital and the trust in government. So South Korea spent a lot of money into this kind of campaign, but without the trust in government, this kind of a campaign, the less likely to make up appropriate function and even intended effects in the right manner and as expected manner. So next, among groups with a higher media literacy and participation in this campaign, increase the trust in government. Among groups with low media literacy, participation in this campaign did not affect the trust in the government. And the next is within government with high trust in government, participation in this campaign increased the positive perception on circular economy policy. Next is participation in TikTok for Good and a campaign. The raised awareness of carbon absorption and policies So this kind of intervention allow people to be more interested and to be more geared toward about the specific national missions and mandates by the government in terms of carbon neutrality. However, high trust in government was the precondition to this result. As I said before, trusting in government paramount to the effectiveness of this kind of national intervention and literacy campaigns. Within the group of individuals with active problem-solving tendencies, participation in this campaign increased the sense of self-efficacy and a behavior change in favor of carbon neutrality. Specifically, those who participated in this campaign showed more sense of self-efficacy of a behavior change in favor of carbon neutrality. However, this result only appears within the group with high problem-solving propensity. In addition, with low problem-solving propensity, participating in this campaign did not affect the behavior change toward the carbon neutrality. And last, within the group of high media literacy, participation in this campaign improved the self-efficacy of a behavior change toward the carbon neutrality. The more specifically, the group of individuals participating in this campaign showed a greater sense of self-efficacy than the group of individuals who did not participate. Let me make a summary of my research. First, harness the data-driven public communication campaign that allowed and encouraged young people to participate in a social media and content creation for carbon neutrality. So next year, based on the findings and the carbon neutrality national campaign and the media literacy services by government, it will as hard the use of data and social media contents and even the emerging technology, the services that fit with the young generation's media tendencies and the media the usage behavior and even individual the characteristics for the making greater impact. The public information communication efforts that tailored to the media habits of the young people can result in an increasing uptake of opportunities to get involved and ultimately strengthen the legitimacy the policy decisions related to the carbon neutrality. Second is encouraging social innovation, economic development that related to carbon neutrality and the circular economy. This should be based on the trust in government and social media literacy. So campaign is only campaign. So to make a campaign more effective, trust building and the literacy cultivations, the precondition to the ensure the effectiveness of the national level, the interventions and the campaigns to the young populations in the area of carbon neutrality. The active and engaging young people can be a resource of government innovation, improve the services. So trust building and a media literacy campaign and the public communication services for carbon neutrality should be integrated and should be interactively function to serve the better the carbon neutrality policy actions. Last, engaging young people in an open government initiative for climate action can result in increasing understanding and interest among young people in circular economy issues and foster active citizenship for carbon neutrality. So engaging people, young people, it builds a strong citizenship and the membership of youth groups and voluntary organizations correlated with the future, the political engagement and build trust and transparency between generations and between citizens and their government in response to climate changes. So I would say that these national level experimentations, the first endeavor by multidisciplinary expert groups to serve better the young populations. So the next year and the coming years to come, the Korean society is going to make more individualized and personalized and customized public communication campaigns to help young people to be more technological savvy and even policy-wise understanding and the better choice architect about carbon neutrality and circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Taejun. That was fascinating. I particularly loved the findings about the preconditions which are necessary for such a campaign to work. Does anybody out there in the audience, if you have any questions for Professor Lee, please put them in the Q&A. And while we're waiting for that, we don't have much time, but I do have one question for you, Taejun. All technologies, all platforms have affordances, what they're very good at and what they're bad at, what you can do with them, what you can't do with them. In using TikTok, did your team find that there were certain types of messaging, for example, that was very hard to use, and certain types of messaging that was actually in line with the type of TikTok content and the type of content that TikTok facilitates, allows for?
Okay, let me make this answer in response to these questions. These questions are really important and very meaningful. That we use in a short form media platform, short form. Composed of the visual and audio and the interactive images. So the 15 seconds and a short form media is highly welcome and very favored by the young people. They are well cultivated to communicate with the people using the 15 seconds media contents and the media communications and the communication technologies. So I do not give you the simple answer to these questions. There are many types of communication styles and communication messages and communication behaviors created on the TikTok platform. I would say that next time we're going to analyze what kind of the messages and the communication symbols and the communication actions that created based on the TikTok platform. But basically, the MZ generation in South Korea very well cultivated to use symbols, pictures, pictorial element, and interactive the images to make a policy thinking and policy issues, and even voice there about the public policies related to carbon neutrality.
Great, great, thank you. We have time just for one brief question from our Q&A. I know we're over time, so we'll keep this brief, but how did you define high and low media literacy?
High, low, yeah. So basically we measure. So we measure the Korean society use and the media literacy, the measurement, the system that will fit with the segmented population. So we use the measurement, as a kind of a test.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Lee. Okay, I wish we could speak longer on each of these, and I'm sure the same thing is going to happen with our next presentation as well. This is Alex McFarland, and she'll be speaking on the role of LG Comms, and she at LG Comms is the chair. Alex, welcome.
Thank you. That's not the first slide. Were you okay to go back to the start, or did you want me to share my own screen? Thank you very much. Perfect. So thank you very much, Professor Duncombe. As you say, I'm here today to talk about public sector communications in a pandemic world and how LG Comms is navigating that. Next slide, please. My name is Alex McFarlane, and as I've been introduced, I'm the chair of LG Comms. Next slide, please. LG Comms, or LG Communications, is a national body made up of an association of local authorities. We work together to raise the standard of communications in local government and the public sector here in the UK. Next slide. To give you a bit of background to who we were formed in the early 2000s when a group of leading council communications practitioners came together to volunteer their time to form a national body, a professional body for public sector communications. Our aim is to work collectively to provide personal development, enhance skills, share knowledge, and develop networking opportunities. We do this through training, events, research, and a dedicated programme for future leaders in our industry. And we're supported in our objectives by the Local Government Association and the PRCA. Next slide, please. Today, we have more than 150 member organisations from around the UK with a local government focus. One thing all our members have in common is that we are stronger together. We're able to share best practice, reduce feelings of isolation for smaller teams, and truly build effective networks across all levels of government. During the pandemic, we've worked closer with GCS, the Government Communication Service, than ever before. And this amplifies what we do and provides mutual support, as I say, across all levels of government. I'll emphasise again the volunteer nature of the senior executive officers of LG Comms. Myself and the other senior officers are elected each year. This dedication to developing talent and improving our sector is a driver to success. And this unified approach across all areas gives us a powerful voice for our members, and it benefits all the residents we serve. Next slide, please. To give you an idea of local government in the UK, at the end of 2020, 5.5 million people were working in the public sector in the UK. And of this number, 2 million people were working in local government. Council staff work to provide more than 800 different services and to deliver democratically agreed council policies. Services provided by councils have a direct impact on residents' everyday lives, from parking and waste services through to life-saving support in adult social care and public health. Next slide, please. As Professor Lee mentioned, trust in government is very important, and trust in local government in the UK is particularly high. This graph shows details from a survey that was taken last year, where 74% of respondents singled out local councillors as opposed to members of parliament or government ministers at a national level as the individuals they most trust. And this survey confirms a trend that's been evident since 2014. Next slide, please. This means we can have an authentic voice. Communications teams in local governments and across the public sector play a vital role in building trust. As mentioned, our role is to share information to inform residents of essential public services and to explain the democratic political decisions taken on their behalf. This includes engaging with local communities and empowering local groups. An open dialogue and informed public supports are important for supporting the democratic function. Next slide, please. Research shows audiences respond well to messages speaking directly to them. Digital communications can be geo-targeted to reach into specific audiences, creating that hyper-local or really personal connection. Understanding an audience and recognizing different needs for language or format is key to success. Local government is at the heart of our communities, delivering communications to audiences we know well and have established yet evolving relationships with. Next slide, please. So the impact of COVID-19 on local government has been huge. Everything has happened much quicker than pre-pandemic. Campaigns that were taken months to plan and years to fully deliver were created and rolled out at significant pace. This was made possible through increased data-driven analysis of local communities and demographics, really finding out who we were speaking to and where they were. Alliances formed between partner organisations and local community leaders, including new voices, from social media influencers to grassroots community activists. Targeted messaging produced at pace, tailored to specific audiences, was key, as was our fast-moving communications decisions and asset creations. And as always, ongoing evaluation to learn and improve. Next slide, please. The digital landscape that we now use so prolifically complements traditional democratic methods of communication for local government. Building consensus and harnessing local support can help tackle the rise of misinformation. People amplify clear messaging from sources they believe they can trust. On our social media channels, we see followers challenging misinformation and citing accurate sources to counter-comment in a way that is hugely beneficial to both audience reach and for showing support of the aims of the message. This is why it's always so important to follow the data and make evidence-based decisions when producing content. Next slide, please. There's no doubt the pandemic has shown the power of local government communications and the importance of meeting the changing needs of our residents. To continue to succeed and to make the most of what we're already doing, we need to do the following actions. Collaborate at every opportunity and at all levels to build trusts and alliances. Use audience insight and data as the base for all communications. Be open and accountable. That's the importance of the trust. Incorporate resident, partner, and stakeholder input. Listen to the people who we want to listen to us. Update skills explore innovative approaches, and be open to new ideas. It's also important to create an inclusive workforce representing our communities. This helps to foster talent, improve understanding, and push for positive change. And we must evaluate consistently and continually to use outcomes to improve for the future. Because as I said, together we are stronger, more resilient, and more effective. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Alex. Now, this is the second time this whole idea of trust in government has come up, just between two panelists. And I know Carlotta in our next panel is going to be speaking about disinformation. Did you find that there are certain mediums and platforms which are actually low trust versus high trust? Or is it really just a matter of who is presenting behind the platform?
It's definitely a case of who's presenting behind the platform, but it's also choosing the right platform for the audience, because different audiences will trust different platforms. So for example, where Professor Lee was talking about TikTok and the young audience he was targeting, that would be highly effective. However, during the COVID pandemic in the UK, we've gone back to very basics of speaking face to face with people. So although the core narrative will retain the same, the way to build the trust is to make sure you're using your audience insight and evaluate how that's working so you can adapt and change to make sure that everyone is receiving the information they need, but in the way they need to hear it.
Great. If people have questions for Alex, we probably have time for one more. And while we're waiting, just want to share a story of, I work with a group in Senegal called Journal Rappé, and that they actually use rap music as a way to convey political information. And when I've talked to them about, well, where did this come from? It came from exactly this idea of trust, is that in Senegal, young people do not trust the news. They don't trust government officials. Anything that comes out of their mouth is corrupt, suspect, and so on, but they listen to rap music. And so these two rappers, Human and KT, actually used the form of rap music to convey information. It's been so successful, it's now been reproduced in many countries around the world.
That's a fantastic example of reaching into the audience and sharing a message in a way that people are going to enjoy. And that's at the heart of all our communications, of course. Great.
Thank you. I don't see any questions up yet, but maybe some will come up. But I do want to turn to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Carlotta Alfonsi, and she's a policy analyst for OECD, and will speak about this idea of misinformation and what can be done to counter it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. Very pleased to join this discussion, and I think I'm gonna bring up some of the themes that have come up so far and link them to the role of communication in combating this challenge of misinformation, which is pervasive, but also linked very much to the social media platforms and the digitalization of communication. That is the theme of today's academy. So if I can have the next slide, please. To introduce a little bit the angle that we come at this subject from, I work in the Open Government Unit of the OECD, which is where we work with our members to advance a culture of governance grounded in the principles of transparency, integrity, accountability, and stakeholder participation, which are also the foundations of the OGP. And we approach the question of misinformation from the angle of open government. And I personally research how to improve communication between government and citizen, as well as strengthening information ecosystems. This is because the flow of information between government, citizens, stakeholders, this is an essential element of open and inclusive societies. It is a prerequisite, if you will, for government transparency and for citizens to participate constructively in public life. And this, all of these things is precisely what large-scale misinformation threatens. If I can move to the next slide, please. Based on what I outlined in terms of the Foundation Open Government, I think it is useful to frame the discussion of the problem of misinformation within the broader issue of low public trust towards governments and towards information as well. which is what we already touched upon. So in the sense, we see counteracting disinformation as part of a broader effort to support an information ecosystem that citizens can trust and that can serve as a space for democratic debate and engagement. We can also see misinformation as a symptom of a wider vulnerability in the information ecosystem. And for example, in a working paper that we published last year, we documented the decline of journalism, which in parallel to the rise of social media platform and their algorithms, together this threatens the media's business models and in a way changes the incentive for publishers towards more sensationalism to compete for the limited attention of online users. Underpinning this whole challenge is also a crisis of trust in government and in democracy. An underlying issue is with polarization, for example, fracturing within societies. But there's also widespread distrust towards information and information sources. No matter where you find news, people are less likely to trust what they see online and offline as well. And this is what the statistics that you see on the slide are supposed to reinforce. I would say that the decline in trust very much predates the rise of mis and disinformation, but is certainly aggravated by it. And in this respect, when we think about what we want to solve, what the problem to fix is, we really shouldn't lose sight of addressing the root causes that make misinformation dangerous, at the same time as we focus on curbing, for example, the level of its spread, say. So the point here is that there's a lot of debate about fixing platforms, which is extremely important and urgent. But that alone, in my view, will not necessarily make the deeper issues facing democracy go away if we don't also build a healthy information ecosystem and the institutions that listen to citizens. So I'll move to the next slide, please. And here I included a snapshot of what we see as a holistic approach for government interventions. And this approach seeks to address both the immediate issues with disinformation in terms of acting on disinformation that is already there, but also looking at more systemic ways that we can improve the supply of trustworthy and diverse information in the ecosystem as a whole. From the top left, we have the responses grounded in proactive public communication. And I would emphasize here that we're not talking about PR or improving the image of the government. This is really about delivering timely, accurate, comprehensive information to citizens and conducting listening, not prying or spying, but like open listening to be more responsive to citizens. And when this is done well, public communication can then serve to prevent disinformation, for example, by filling gaps in the available information that are often exploited by disinformation narratives and rumors. So this is something that we've seen several OECD countries doing, and there's an explicit recognition of the role of communication in this respect. I would emphasize as well that prevention should really be the priority here, because as we now know, once people are exposed to false content, it is much harder to correct their perceptions. I'll mention briefly some of the key practices in this area. For example, we talk about techniques for monitoring online public discourse and anticipate and fill information voids. So using, for instance, advanced structures to gather continuous and in-depth insights, triangulating different data sources. For example, the CDC has noted their use of their live monitoring of search engine queries, so that they can in real time understand what content to publish to make sure that these questions go answered and there's no voids that leave people speculating and spreading rumors. Another practice involves better targeting communication to make it more inclusive. Some groups, as research shows, are particularly hard to reach, and others are especially vulnerable to misinformation. So here, tailoring communication is really about using insights to understand which messengers and specific groups, for example, certain audiences will trust, and then crafting content that will be resonant and persuasive and relatable to those specific groups that are identified. And we also see more rigorous applications of behavioral insights, for example, and this is one area where this is a demonstration, if you will, of the importance of evidence-based communication and the data-driven communication, for example, that Professor Lee was mentioning before. I'll move on to the next leaf in the graphic there on the right. No, sorry, keeping the same slide. So on that top right corner, we have reactive responses, so interventions to monitor, preempt, and respond to rumors and falsehoods that emerge. And these are in essence also communication activities, and they stress the importance of the function in terms of government responses to misinformation. Here, briefly, there are a number of guidelines and tips for debunking, which is increasingly common practice and increasingly effective to curb widespread disinformation. On the other hand, there's also an increasing body of examples and practices relating to pre-bunking. So anticipating the likely rumors and dismissing them before they surface as a sort of vaccine immunization theory that is behind it. Then again, we can look at how government use communication to alert people to recognize misinformation tactics so that they are better able to identify and not engage with it. And there are several countries, and for example, the World Health Organization, that have ran campaigns that aim to instruct people on how to share information responsibly and to reduce the amplification of false information. Then in the bottom section, we look at regulatory measures, so platform transparency, content moderation, and interventions of this kind. And for the purpose of today's presentation, I will not delve deeper in this complex policy area because of time, and also to keep in mind that there's a really complex debate behind it. But I will conclude by listing some of the practices instead that fall under like a holistic sort of category of interventions that aim to make the information ecosystem more resilient. So this bottom right leaf looks at ways of involving all stakeholders in the ecosystem to empower them to contribute to a healthier space for civic debate. Here we look, for example, at media and digital literacy, both in schools and for adults. We look at how government can take steps to support independent and public service media, especially fact checkers, whether with funding, regulation, any policies relating to this type of support and enabling these important actors. Then we look at, for example, the role of research and civic-led initiatives and participatory processes for citizens to deliberate on issues such as hate speech and topics related to information and discourse, for example, that we've seen happen in Canada and in Finland. And then finally, there's a very important practice that we also have seen expand during the pandemic, which is government collaboration with the platforms themselves, the social media platforms, to amplify corrections and verified information, but also share analysis and insights to craft effective responses to the challenges we face. So there's a lot here to unpack, and I'll be happy to discuss any of this further in the Q&A. But in the interest of time, if we can move to the next slide, I'll give a little bit of a preview of the good practice principles on combating misinformation that the OECD is currently finalizing. There are 10 draft principles of good practices that we'll show you in the next slide, which are based on the mapping of practices in the field of counter misinformation responses and the factors that make these responses effective. The practices that we look at are structured across 3 interlinked levels of intervention. And in this graphic here, we have first the communication practices that directly aim to counter mis and disinformation and provide trustworthy information instead. The next level is consists of practices that form the building blocks of enabling institutions. So both material and normative policies and practices that guide the actions of government agencies, policies that define organizational structure and intergovernmental coordination and coordination with stakeholders. We talk about the necessary resources and skills to operate and implement responses. So this dimension of institution is actually a very important one, and includes also considerations about normative considerations about speech, about information, and complex issues that are very pressing to define in the digital information age. And then the third level that we look at goes a little bit back to what I was saying before about the holistic interventions. And we talk about here an enabling ecosystem. So one in which governments drive a whole society effort to support the flow of trustworthy information and data, while at the same time mitigating the spread of problematic content. And this is grounded in a role for each and every stakeholder, including citizens and including the social media company themselves, for example. So in a nutshell, this is what we mean by a holistic approach. And this is the practices that we look at in this mapping exercise that is not detailed here, but on which I've touched upon over the course of the presentation. This is what the principles are based on. And if I can have the next slide, please. This is the 10 principles that we've identified are what drives the efficacy of the interventions that we discussed. So you can see them on this slide, and the principles are, they aim to help governments to, one, ensure that policies and communication activities are informed by and promote the open government principles, and so that they're conducted in a transparent and honest way. They are inclusive. They engender two-way dialogue in a responsive manner, and that they resonate with citizen needs, but also work with all of the relevant public and private stakeholders in a whole society fashion. Two, the principles aim to establish mechanisms for effective communication through public interest driven, which is what we say when we mean to depoliticize debate, but also making communication better institutionalized and evidence-based. And last, the principles serve to focus on the challenges of mitigating the spread of misinformation through building capacity for timely preventive and future-proofing the way that we act against this this problematic challenge. And here I will stop. There's a lot that we can follow up on, and I'm looking forward to your question. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Carlotta. We are a little bit behind, so what I would like to ask for is if people have questions. I've already seen a question go up in the chat and also a question in the Q&A. And Carlotta, maybe you can actually respond to some of those questions. on the chat and in the Q&A. But I do know that people are probably scheduled for things after this, and I want to make sure that all the presentations have time. Our next presenter is Professor Taejun Lee, and he will be joining us actually in a recorded session. So I guess we can start to run that now.
Hello, my name is Taejun Lee from Korea University. Today I will talk about civility and digital participation in South Korea. The following subject will be covered in this talk. To explain the issue of the digital participation, I would like to use the concept of the public sphere proposed by German philosopher and sociologist Habermas. According to him, it is very important to keep public sphere where informed citizen or individual can share information and debate in democratic society. According to Habermas, the crisis of the representative democracy came from the collapse or problem of the public sphere. Naturally, digital participation is one way to promote collective intelligence and public sphere in modern society. Well, it is well known that South Korea is one of the top countries in the field of information technology infrastructure, as well as usages of the social media. For example, many South Korean internet users are actively engaged in online game, multimedia broadcasting, social media, and so on. Information technology, has been widely used to promote digital participation. We had the candlelight vigil for 2 teenage girls killed by a U.S. vehicle in 2002, and the candlelight demonstration against the government decision to resume the importation of American beef in 2008. In addition, we witnessed the role of the social media in the demonstration for the impeachment of the President Park Geun-hye over a corruption scandal in 2017. However, despite of the active digital participation, there are some problems though. First, those who are already politically motivated and engaged tend to more opportunity for electronic political engagement as well as real-world politics, which is related to information inequality as well as political inequality. In addition, active digital participation often result in effective responses, collective effectiveness, and hostile political conflict. So I would like to mention some issue relating to digital participation in South Korea. First, it is necessary to increase the level of civility of general population. I strongly believe that without such foundation, simple, larger volume of the digital participation cannot guarantee a more democratized society. Second, such civility should be linked to the local community. Too many issues are subordinate to the framework of at the level of the state in South Korea. So I believe that that is very important. It is very important to increase civility at the level of the local community. This is the end of today's talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can bring all of the panelists back on. So it's not just me. There we go. In any case, I think we're almost at time. Yes, here we go. Now we're getting more people up here. And I just want to thank, all of the panelists for being here. These are incredible, incredible talks. I wish we actually had an hour for each of you. I feel like we just is the tip of the iceberg in terms of information, but I have learned a lot, and I'm sure you have learned from each other, but also the people that are with us have learned. And so I thank you very much, first of all, to the panelists. Second, to all the people that made this happen, all the people behind the scenes, but probably most importantly, to the attendees. This is, just one panel for the 2021 OGP Academy, and I hope you'll be around for other panels. Wherever you are and whatever time of the day it is, I wish you well. And again, thank you to our panelists.